Marcus Williams stood in his empty garage, staring at the freshly installed padlock where his late father's restored 1967 Mustang once sat. The HOA notice crumpled in his trembling fist read, "Vehicle confiscated, unpaid fees." What they didn't know was that 3 hours ago, he'd walked out of a lawyer's office with papers that would change everything. The same people who'd just stolen his most precious possession now worked for him. Marcus Williams pulled into his driveway at 6:47 p.m., the familiar rumble of his pickup truck echoing off the pristine garage door of 2847 Willowbrook Lane. The November air carried the scent of burning leaves and the distant promise of snow, but tonight felt different. Tonight felt wrong. The garage door groaned upward, revealing an expanse of oil-stained concrete where his father's 1967 Mustang Fastback should have been parked. The cherry-red beast with its chrome bumper and hand-detailed interior, gone. In its place sat a folding table with a manila envelope and a fresh padlock dangling from a chain. Marcus's hands went numb. The keys slipped from his fingers, clattering against the concrete like coins in an empty well. "No," he whispered, then louder. "No, no, no!" He lunged forward, snatching the envelope with shaking hands. The letterhead made his blood freeze. Willowbrook Estates, Homeowners Association. Final notice. Due to non-payment of accumulated fees, totaling $3,847.50. The vehicle described as 1967 Ford Mustang, license DBW 847, has been removed from the premises per Section 12.7 of the HOA covenant. Vehicle will be held at Miller's Impound, 1847 Industrial Boulevard. Payment must be rendered within 72 hours or vehicle will be sold at auction to recover fees. The paper crumpled in Marcus's fist. $3,800. For what? He'd been paying his HOA dues religiously for 8 years, ever since his father died and left him the house. Every month, like clockwork, $127 drafted from his checking account. His phone buzzed. A text from his buddy Jake at the fire station. "Saw a tow truck hauling your dad's Mustang down Maple Street around 4. Everything okay?" Marcus's vision tunneled. They'd taken it while he was at work. They'd come onto his property and stolen. The one thing, the only thing, he had left of his father. The sound of heels clicking against pavement made him spin around. Margaret Henley, HOA president and neighborhood busybody extraordinaire, approached with her characteristic smile that never quite reached her eyes. Behind her walked Tom Fletcher, the HOA treasurer, clutching his ever-present clipboard like a shield. "Oh, Marcus," Margaret called out, her voice dripping with false concern. "I see you found our notice. We really do hate when things come to this, but rules are rules." Marcus stepped toward them, the crumpled paper still clutched in his white-knuckled fist. "You stole my car." Now, Tom interjected, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "It's not stealing when it's legally sanctioned collection activity. You've been in violation for months." "I've never missed a payment. Not once in 8 years." Margaret's smile widened. "Oh, honey, you've been paying your monthly dues, yes. But you seem to have missed all the special assessments, the pool renovation, fund, the new street lighting initiative, the landscaping beautification project. Didn't you read the notices?" Marcus felt like he was drowning in quicksand. "What notices?" Tom flipped through his clipboard with theatrical precision. "We sent 3 certified letters to this address. According to postal records, they were delivered on September 15th, October 3rd, and October 28th. I never received any certified letters." "That's unfortunate," Margaret said, not sounding unfortunate at all. "But the Postal Service shows delivery confirmation. Perhaps you should check with your mail carrier." Marcus knew his mail carrier. Jerry Kowalski had been delivering to Willowbrook for 12 years, and they'd talked just last week about Jerry's grandson making the high school football team. Jerry would have mentioned certified letters. "This is garbage," Marcus said. You can't just take someone's car because of alleged unpaid fees they never knew about. Actually, we can. Tom's voice carried the smug satisfaction of a man who'd memorized every line of the HOA covenant. Section 12.7 clearly states that in cases of delinquent accounts exceeding 90 days, the association has the right to secure assets equal to the debt amount. Your vehicle was assessed at $40,200, which more than covers the outstanding balance. Marcus's father had spent 3 years restoring that Mustang. Weekends in the garage, teaching Marcus how to rebuild an engine, how to sand primer smooth as glass, how to patience paint candy apple red and thin, even coats. The car wasn't worth $4,000. It was worth everything. You want your money? Marcus's voice came out low and dangerous. Fine. I'll get your money. But I want that car back tonight. Margaret's smile finally faltered. Oh, I'm afraid that's not how this works. The vehicle remains impounded until full payment is received, plus towing and storage fees, of course. That'll run you another $600 or so. Storage fees? $25 per day, Tom said, consulting his clipboard again. Really quite reasonable for a climate-controlled facility. Marcus did the math. Even if he could scrape together $4,000 by tomorrow, every day he waited would cost him more. And where was he going to find $4,000? His savings account had maybe $800, and his next paycheck from the county road department wouldn't come for another week. This is extortion, he said. This is community standards enforcement, Margaret replied smoothly. We all agreed to these rules when we purchased our homes. They exist to protect property values and maintain the character of our neighborhood. Marcus looked around at the pristine lawns, the identical mailboxes, the houses that all looked like they'd been stamped from the same suburban cookie cutter. Character. Right. I need to see the covenant again, he said. I need to understand exactly what you think gives you the right to steal from me. Tom brightened like a teacher whose student had finally asked the right question. Oh, absolutely. I have copies in my car. The relevant sections are highlighted and annotated. You'll find everything is quite above board. As Tom scurried off to fetch his documents, Margaret stepped closer to Marcus. Up close, he could smell her perfume. Something expensive and sharp, like roses preserved in formaldehyde. Marcus, she said, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a motherly tone. I know this seems harsh, but we have to think about the greater good. Your father, bless his heart, he understood community responsibility. He never fought us on these kinds of things. Marcus felt heat crawl up his neck. Don't you dare talk about my father. I'm just saying he was reasonable. He understood that sometimes individual sacrifice is necessary for community benefit. Her eyes glittered. Perhaps this is a sign that it's time for you to consider whether Willowbrook is still the right fit for your lifestyle. The threat was subtle but clear. Pay up or get out. Tom returned with a 3-ring binder thick enough to use as a weapon. Here we are, the Willowbrook Estates Covenant, Conditions and Restrictions, as amended through 2023. Now, if you'll turn to page 47. Marcus took the binder but didn't open it. How long do I have? 72 hours from notice delivery, Tom said. So that would be Thursday at 6:47 p.m. And if I can't pay? Margaret's smile returned full force. Well, then Miller's gets to auction your car to recover the debt. Whatever's left over after fees and storage costs gets returned to you, of course. Of course, Marcus knew enough about impound auctions to understand that a specialized vehicle like his father's Mustang would probably sell for a fraction of its real value. He'd be lucky to see $500 back. I need time to think, he said. Of course you do, Margaret said, but don't think too long. Every day costs money. As they walked away, Marcus heard Tom's voice carrying on the evening air. Really, Margaret, I think this went quite well. Much better than the Patterson situation last spring. The Patterson situation. Marcus remembered that. Bill Patterson had gotten into some kind of dispute with the HOA over his fence height and ended up selling his house at a loss just to get out from under the legal fees. Word was that Margaret had bought it through a shell company and flipped it 6 months later for a $60,000 profit. Marcus stood in his empty garage holding the covenant binder like a lead weight. Somewhere across town, his father's car sat in an impound lot, accumulating fees like interest on a payday loan. He thought about calling a lawyer, but lawyers cost money he didn't have. He thought about calling the police, but the HOA's paperwork would be ironclad. People like Margaret didn't make moves without covering every legal angle twice. His phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Hello? Mr. Williams, this is Janet Morrison from Morrison, Keller and Associates. I apologize for calling so late, but we've been trying to reach you regarding the estate of Eleanor Henley. Marcus frowned. I think you have the wrong number. I don't know anyone named Eleanor Henley. Actually, sir, I believe I have the right number. You are Marcus Williams of 2847 Willowbrook Lane? Yes, but, Mr. Williams, I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning if possible. We have some documents that require your immediate attention. Documents that I believe will be of significant interest to you, especially. Marcus arrived at Morrison, Keller and Associates at 8:15 a.m., 15 minutes early, and running on 3 hours of sleep and gas station coffee. The law office occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian house on Elm Street, all dark wood, and brass fixtures that suggested competence and discretion. Janet Morrison turned out to be a woman in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and the kind of steady gaze that had probably stared down hostile witnesses in 1,000 depositions. She led Marcus into a conference room, where documents were arranged across a mahogany table like pieces of a complex puzzle. Coffee? She offered, gesturing to a silver service that looked older than Marcus. Please. Marcus's voice came out rougher than he'd intended. Ms. Morrison, I have to ask, how did Eleanor Henley even know who I am? I've never heard her name before yesterday. Janet poured coffee into delicate china cups that made Marcus's calloused hands feel enormous. Eleanor lived at 2891 Willowbrook Lane for 37 years. That's 4 houses down from you, on the opposite side of the street. She knew everyone in the neighborhood. Marcus searched his memory. 2891. Willowbrook. The blue house with the rose garden. He'd seen an elderly woman working in that garden. Sometimes, but they'd never spoken. She'd seemed like just another neighborhood fixture. She left me part of the HOA because she lived near me? Not exactly. Janet opened a leather portfolio and withdrew a letter written in spidery handwriting. This might explain things better than I can. The letter was addressed to Marcus Williams in Eleanor's careful script. Dear Marcus, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and my insufferable daughter-in-law Margaret has finally pushed someone too far. I hope it was you, because you seem like the only person in this godforsaken subdivision with any backbone left. I have watched Margaret and her cronies turn our neighborhood into their personal kingdom for the past 8 years. They have driven out the Pattersons, the Kowalskis, and the Chen family with their manufactured violations and special assessments. They prey on people who can't fight back, who don't understand the system, who just want to live in peace. But I understood the system perfectly. I helped write it. When Willowbrook was first developed in 1987, my late husband Charles was the attorney who drafted the original HOA covenant. He was very careful about the ownership structure, very careful about voting rights. Most people don't realize that the HOA isn't just a governing body, it's a corporation, and like any corporation, it can be owned. Over the years, Charles and I quietly acquired shares from people who wanted out, people who moved away, people who died without heirs, who cared about suburban politics. It was surprisingly easy. $100 here, $500 there. Most. Folks were happy to sell their voting rights for beer money. By the time Charles died in 2018, we owned 43% of the HOA. I've spent the last 5 years buying up more shares, waiting for the right moment to use them. That moment, I believe, is now. Margaret doesn't know about the shares, because they're held in a trust that was established before she married my son Richard. She thinks she runs the HOA through democratic process and community support. What she actually runs is a company that she doesn't own. I'm leaving you these shares because I've watched you, Marcus. I've seen how you care for your father's house, how you maintain that beautiful car, how you keep to yourself and don't bother anyone. More importantly, I've seen how you react when people try to push you around. The Patterson incident was the final straw for me. Margaret and her lackeys manufactured a fence violation to steal that poor man's home. She made $50,000 profit while Bill Patterson lost his retirement savings. I won't let her do it to you. Use these shares wisely, Marcus. The power you now hold comes with responsibility. Don't become the thing you're fighting against. Your neighbor, Eleanor Henley P.S. Check the HOA's financial records. I suspect Margaret has been far more creative with community funds than anyone realizes. Marcus set the letter down with shaking hands. She bought HOA shares? You can do that? Most people don't realize it, but yes. The HOA is structured as a corporation. Each property owner gets one share automatically, but additional shares can be purchased or transferred. Janet spread several documents across the table. Eleanor accumulated a total of 247 shares over 36 years. Combined with your automatic share as a property owner, you control 248 of the 370 total shares in the Willowbrook Estates HOA Corporation. Marcus did the math. That's 67%. Exactly. You have controlling interest, which means you have the power to elect the board of directors, approve budgets, modify covenants, and essentially run the HOA however you see fit. The implications hit Marcus like a freight train. Margaret Henley had spent years wielding the HOA like a personal weapon, never knowing that someone else held the real power. And now that someone was the man whose car she'd stolen just yesterday. There's more, Janet continued. As the majority shareholder, you have the right to demand a complete financial audit. You also have the right to call emergency board meetings, replace officers, and review all association records. Marcus thought about Eleanor's postscript. She suspected financial impropriety. Eleanor was very astute about numbers. She served as the HOA treasurer from 1987 to 2003 before Margaret's faction pushed her out. She knew where every dollar should be going. How do I use this information? Janet smiled for the first time since Marcus had arrived. Very carefully. Margaret has been operating under the assumption that she's untouchable. People who feel untouchable often make mistakes. Big ones. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. The sender was listed as HOA Board. Final reminder, payment due by 6:47 p.m. Thursday or vehicle will be auctioned Friday morning. M. Sir Henley. The irony was so thick Marcus could taste it. Margaret was texting threats to the man who now owned her organization. I need to see those financial records, Marcus said. I thought you might. Eleanor anticipated that too. Janet opened another folder and withdrew a thick stack of bank statements, receipts, and ledger sheets. She'd been requesting copies of everything for months under her rights as a shareholder. Margaret's been stalling, but she couldn't legally refuse. Marcus flipped through the documents, his construction worker's math skills trying to make sense of the columns of numbers. This doesn't look right. Where's all the money going? That's exactly what Eleanor wanted to know. Look at the special assessment for the pool renovation project. $63,000 collected from residents. Marcus found the expense report for the pool project, but the actual renovation only cost $38,000. Where did the other $25,000 go? Administrative fees, Janet said dryly. paid to Henley Property Management, LLC? Let me guess. Margaret owns Henley Property Management. Her husband Richard does, technically, but yes. And look at the landscaping beautification project. 42,000 collected, 26,000 spent, 16,000 in administrative fees to Henley Property Management. Marcus felt anger building in his chest like steam in a pressure cooker. She's been stealing from the neighborhood for years. It appears that way. And now you have the power to do something about it. Marcus checked his watch. It was 9:47 a.m. His father's car had been impounded for less than 18 hours, and already he could feel the storage fees ticking away like a time bomb. But now he had options he hadn't had yesterday. What happens if I call an emergency board meeting? As majority shareholder, you have that right. 24 hours notice to all board members is required, but you can waive that requirement for yourself since you control the voting block. And at this meeting, I can fire Margaret. You can elect an entirely new board if you want. The shareholders elect the board, and you are now the shareholders. Marcus thought about Margaret's smug smile yesterday, about Tom's clipboard and his careful annotations, about the way they'd talked about his father, community responsibility, individual sacrifice for community benefit. I want to call a meeting for tonight, he said. Janet raised an eyebrow. That's very fast. Don't you want time to plan your approach? They gave me 72 hours to come up with $4,000 or lose my dad's car. I think turnabout is fair play. What exactly do you have in mind? Marcus stood up, Eleanor's letter still clutched in his hand. I'm going to give them a chance to make this right. I'm going to offer them a choice. Return my car immediately and refund every penny they've stolen from the neighborhood or face the consequences of their actions. And if they refuse, then they're going to learn what it feels like to have their lives turned upside down by bureaucratic bullies. Janet gathered the documents into neat stacks. I'll draft the meeting notice immediately. But Marcus, I have to advise caution. People like Margaret don't give up power easily. When she realizes what's happening, she's going to fight back hard. Let her fight. I'm not the same man she stole from yesterday. At 11:15 a.m., Marcus sat in his truck outside Margaret Henley's house, watching her through the kitchen window as she talked on the phone. She was gesturing animatedly, probably describing her latest HOA conquest to one of her friends, having a good laugh about the poor widower who couldn't afford to keep his dead daddy's car. His phone rang. At 8:13 p.m. exactly, Marcus Williams walked into the Morrison, Keller & Associates conference room to find Margaret Henley, Tom Fletcher, and board secretary Linda Cartwright sitting around the mahogany table like defendants awaiting sentencing. The air was thick with tension and Margaret's overpowering perfume, which tonight smelled more like desperation than roses. Janet Morrison had arranged the seating deliberately. Marcus at the head of the table in the attorney's chair. The three board members clustered together on the opposite side like cornered animals. A court reporter sat discreetly in the corner, her fingers poised over the stenography machine. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Marcus began, his voice carrying an authority he'd never felt before. This emergency meeting of the Willowbrook Estates HOA Corporation is now called to order. Margaret's face was ashen, her usual composure cracked like old paint. Tom clutched his clipboard so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Only Linda looked confused, glancing back and forth between the others, as if waiting for someone to explain why they were all acting like they'd seen a ghost. Before we begin, Janet said, sliding a document across the table, I need to present the official share transfer documentation for the record. As of 3 months ago, Marcus Williams became the majority shareholder of this corporation with 67.2% ownership. Linda's mouth fell open. I don't understand. Margaret, what is she talking about? Margaret couldn't meet Linda's eyes. Eleanor Henley. She owned shares. More shares than we knew about. How many more? All of them, Tom whispered. She owned almost all of them. Marcus watched Linda process the information, watched the exact moment she understood that everything she'd believed about the HOA's power structure was a lie. Her face flushed red, then drained to white. "You mean I've been rubber-stamping decisions for an organization that Margaret doesn't actually control?" "That's exactly what you've been doing," Marcus said. "For years." Linda turned on Margaret, with fury Marcus had never seen from the normally quiet librarian. "You told us Eleanor sold her shares when she moved to assisted living. You said we were finally free of her interference." "She lied to us," Margaret said weakly. "She said she was done with HOA politics." "No," Marcus corrected. "Eleanor told you what you wanted to hear so you'd keep digging your own graves. She was documenting everything, waiting for the right moment to act." He opened the manila folder Janet had prepared and spread the contents across the table. Bank statements, invoices, email printouts, photographs, a paper trail of corruption spanning 6 years. "Pool renovation project," Marcus said, pointing to a highlighted spreadsheet. "Residents paid $63,000. Actual work cost $38,000. Where did the other $25,000 go?" Tom's voice cracked as he answered. "Administrative fees for project management and oversight. Paid to Henley Property Management, LLC, which is owned by Richard Henley, Margaret's husband." Marcus pulled out another document. "Landscaping beautification project. 42,000 collected, 26,000 spent, 16,000 in fees to the same company." Linda was staring at Margaret like she'd never seen her before. "You've been stealing from the neighborhood?" "It's not stealing," Margaret said, but her voice had no conviction. "Property management companies charge fees. It's standard business practice." "Standard business practice doesn't involve marking up costs by 60% and pocketing the difference," Marcus said. He pulled out a contractor's estimate dated 6 months ago. "This is what Fernandez Landscaping quoted for the beautification. Work, $18,000. You told residents it would cost $26,000, then charged $16,000 in management fees on top of that." "Project management is complicated," Tom said desperately. "There are unforeseen costs, regulatory requirements." "Shut up, Tom." The voice came from Linda, who was now leafing through the financial documents with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent 30 years organizing information. "Just shut up before you make this worse." Marcus felt a surge of respect for the librarian. "You're beginning to see the scope of the problem." "I'm beginning to see that I've been an accessory to fraud for half a decade." Linda's voice was deadly quiet. "How much, Margaret? How much have you stolen in total?" Margaret's hands were shaking as she reached for her purse. "I need a cigarette." "You quit smoking 10 years ago," Linda said. "Answer the question. How much?" Marcus consulted his notes. "Based on Eleanor's documentation, approximately $137,000 over 6 years, not counting the manufactured violations used to drive out families like the Pattersons." "The Pattersons weren't driven out," Tom protested. "They had legitimate violations." "No, they didn't." Marcus pulled out a photograph showing Bill Patterson's fence. This fence was exactly 6 feet high, which complies with city ordinances and the original HOA covenant. "You claimed it violated the height restriction because you measured it during a rainstorm when the ground was soft, making your measuring stick sink into the mud." Linda's face went from white to purple. "You falsified measurements?" Tom's clipboard slipped from his hands and clattered to the floor. In the silence that followed, Marcus could hear the court reporter's machine clicking like an angry insect. "That's not... We didn't falsify anything. We just interpreted the measurements differently." "You interpreted them differently to create a violation that didn't exist, then imposed fines that escalated until Bill Patterson couldn't afford to fight you anymore. He sold his house at a $30,000 loss to escape the legal fees." Margaret finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "What do you want from us?" Marcus leaned forward. I want you to understand that your days of terrorizing this neighborhood are over. As majority shareholder, I'm calling for a vote to remove all current board members and elect new leadership." "You can't do that," Tom said, but he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. "Actually, I can. As the owner of 67.2% of the corporation, I control 67.2% of the vote. The motion carries." Janet Morrison had been taking notes throughout the meeting. Now she looked up and addressed the 3 board members. "You have the right to contest this action in court, but I should point out that Mr. Williams also has the right to pursue criminal charges for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence is quite substantial." Margaret seemed to shrink in her chair. "What happens to us?" "That depends on your next choices," Marcus said. "Here's what's going to happen immediately. All stolen funds will be returned to the HOA treasury within 48 hours. The Henley property management contracts are terminated effective immediately. All manufactured violations from the past 5 years are declared null and void." "That's impossible," Tom said. "We can't just overturn years of board decisions." "We can, and we will. I'm also establishing a victim compensation fund for residents who were forced to sell their homes due to manufactured violations. The Pattersons will receive $50,000. The Chen family will receive $35,000. Jerry Kowalski's family will receive $27,000. Linda looked confused. "Jerry Kowalski? He never had violations. He's been delivering mail here for 12 years. Marcus pulled out another document. "Jerry had a heart attack in March after you imposed $7,000 in fines for mailbox non-compliance because his truck leaked oil in the driveway while he was hospitalized. His family depleted their savings fighting the fines before Jerry recovered enough to return to work." The room went completely silent except for the court reporter's machine and the ticking of an antique clock on Janet's bookshelf. "My God," Linda whispered. "What have we done?" "What you've done," Marcus said, "is create a reign of terror that ends tonight." Margaret stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I need to make a phone call." "Sit down, Margaret." The command in Marcus's voice surprised even him. Margaret sat. "You'll make your calls after this meeting concludes. Right now, you're going to listen to the new rules." Marcus opened a notebook he'd prepared during the afternoon. "First, all current board members are hereby removed from their positions. Second, I'm appointing an interim board consisting of Linda Cartwright as president, Jerry Kowalski as vice president when he's feeling up to it, and Sarah Chen as treasurer." "Sarah Chen moved away 2 years ago," Tom said. "Sarah Chen was driven away by manufactured violations. She's moving back. I spoke with her this afternoon and offered her the treasurer position along with a formal apology and financial compensation for the harassment she endured." Marcus looked directly at Margaret. "Third, all HOA records will be transferred to the new board within 24 hours. This includes financial records, correspondence, contracts, and every document in your possession related to association business. Some of those records contain privileged information," Margaret said. "Nothing is privileged when it involves potential criminal activity. Fourth, Henley Property Management will return all association property, including equipment, supplies, and any documents or records in their possession." Tom was frantically scribbling notes, as if documentation might somehow save him. "What about ongoing contracts, the pool maintenance, the landscaping, the security patrols?" By 7:30 a.m. Friday morning, Marcus's phone had been buzzing nonstop for 3 hours. Word was spreading through Willowbrook Estates like wildfire, and every call brought a new revelation about Margaret Henley's web of corruption. "Marcus, this is Bill Patterson." The voice was thick with emotion. "Linda Cartwright called me last night about what happened at the board meeting. I can't believe Eleanor was helping us all along." Marcus sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by newspapers and legal documents. watching his father's Mustang gleam in the morning sunlight through the garage window. She was playing a long game, Bill, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Linda said you're setting up a compensation fund. Marcus, you don't owe us anything. You didn't cause this mess. No, but I can help fix it, and I intend to. The next call came from Maria Santos, who lived 3 streets over. Mr. Williams? My neighbor gave me your number. I need to tell you about the deck violation from 2 years ago. Marcus grabbed a notebook. Over the past 12 hours, he'd learned that documentation was everything. What happened with your deck? They said it was 6 inches too close to the property line and fined us $4,000. My husband tore it down rather than fight them, but, Mr. Williams, I just measured it. The deck was exactly where it was supposed to be. They lied about the measurements. Another fabricated violation. Another family terrorized into compliance. Marcus added Maria's name to his growing list. The calls continued throughout the morning. Jerry Kowalski's daughter thanked him through tears for clearing her father's name. The Mitchell family wanted to know if they could get their fence replacement money back. Mrs. Rodriguez asked if the pet violation fines for her therapy dog could be reversed. By 9 a.m., Marcus had documented 14 separate cases of HOA abuse spanning 4 years. The scope of Margaret's operation was staggering. His doorbell rang at 9:47. Through the peephole, Marcus saw Tom Fletcher standing on his porch, holding a cardboard box and looking like he hadn't slept in a week. Marcus opened the door but didn't invite him in. I have the records, Tom said without preamble. Financial files, correspondence, everything. I'm resigning from the board effective immediately. Marcus took the box, which was heavier than it looked. Smart choice. Marcus, I need you to know, I didn't understand what Margaret was doing at first. She told me the management fees were standard, that property management companies always charge 20%. 20% of what? Projects that were already inflated by 60%? Tom's shoulders sagged. I should have questioned it. I should have done my own research. But Margaret made it sound so legitimate, and she had all the documentation. Forged documentation. I know that now. I'm an accountant, Marcus. I should have caught the irregularities years ago. Instead, I helped her steal from our own neighbors. Marcus studied Tom's face, looking for signs of deception. He saw exhaustion, shame, and genuine remorse, but no hint of the calculating malice he'd seen in Margaret. What do you want from me, Tom? I want to help fix this. I want to provide testimony for the forensic audit. I want to help identify every fraudulent transaction so we can make full restitution. And in exchange? Tom's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm hoping you won't press criminal charges. I know I don't deserve mercy, but I have 2 kids in college and a wife who's been battling cancer for 3 years. If I go to prison, they'll lose everything. Marcus felt the weight of judgment settling on his shoulders. Tom Fletcher had been complicit in years of fraud, but he wasn't the mastermind. He was a weak man who'd been manipulated by a stronger personality, and now his family would pay the price for his cowardice. Full cooperation, Marcus said finally. Complete testimony. Every document, every conversation, every detail you can remember. If you hold back anything, the deal is off. Tom's relief was visible. Anything you need. I'll tell you everything. Start with the Patterson case. I want to know exactly how that fence violation was fabricated. For the next 2 hours, Tom. Fletcher systematically destroyed what remained of Margaret Henley's reputation. The fence measurements had been taken during a rainstorm using a modified measuring stick that was 6 inches too long. The drainage violation that had cost the Rodriguez family $3,000 was based on photographs taken after Tom deliberately clogged their storm drain. The pool renovation overcharges had been Margaret's idea, implemented through a series of shell companies designed to hide the money trail. She had it all planned out, Tom said, his voice hollow. Multiple companies, fake invoices, even backdated contracts. She'd been setting this up for years. Marcus made notes as Tom talked, building a case that would ensure Margaret faced serious consequences for her crimes. But the more he learned, the more he realized that Margaret's corruption extended beyond simple theft. "Tell me about the Patterson house sale," Marcus said. Tom's face went pale. "What do you want to know?" "I want to know who bought it after." Bill was forced out. It was purchased by Pine Valley Properties, LLC. "And who owns Pine Valley Properties?" Tom's voice cracked. "Margaret's brother-in-law, David Henley." Marcus felt cold fury building in his chest. She forced Bill to sell at a loss, then her family bought it at below market value. David flipped it 6 months later for $80,000 more than he paid. How many other houses? Tom consulted his notes with shaking hands. 4, maybe 5. The Chen house, the Patterson house, the Miller place on Sycamore Street, and the corner lot where the Kowalski's elderly mother used to live. Marcus did quick math in his head. If each house had been bought below market and flipped for profit, the Henley family had made somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 on forced sales alone. Combined with the embezzled HOA funds, they'd essentially looted the neighborhood for over $500,000. "Does Margaret know you're here?" Marcus asked. "No. She thinks I'm meeting with my lawyer this morning. She doesn't know I've decided to cooperate." Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Linda Cartwright's number. "Marcus, we have a problem," Linda said without preamble. "Margaret cleaned out the HOA bank accounts this morning, all of them." Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. "How much?" $47,000. Everything we had for emergency repairs, seasonal maintenance, and the reserve fund. It's all gone." Through his front window, Marcus could see Tom. Fletcher's face go white as he overheard Linda's side of the conversation. "Where did she move the money?" "We don't know yet. The bank said the transfers were authorized by the treasurer, but Tom's signature looks forged. We're filing a police report, but she might be gone by the time they act on it." Marcus looked at Tom, who was now openly panicking. "Linda, I need you to call Janet Morrison immediately. Tell her Margaret has escalated to grand theft and we need emergency legal action." "Already done. Janet's filing for an emergency asset freeze this afternoon." Marcus hung up and turned to Tom. "Did you know she was planning this?" "No, I swear, Marcus, I had no idea. My signature cards are in my home office safe. She must have..." Tom's voice trailed off as realization hit him. "She has keys to my house. She's been watering my plants while my wife was in chemotherapy. She could have copied my signature any time. Call your bank. Now. Make sure she can't access any of your accounts." As Tom frantically dialed his bank, Marcus called Linda back. "I need addresses for all the Henley family properties. Margaret, Richard, David, anyone connected to their operation." "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to make sure they don't disappear with our money." Marcus grabbed his truck keys and headed for the door, but Tom's voice stopped him. "Marcus, wait. There's something else. Something I should have told you earlier." "What?" Tom's hands were shaking as he pulled a flash drive from his pocket. "Margaret doesn't know I have this. It's encrypted backup files from her computer, financial records, email correspondence, everything. I copied it 6 months ago when I started getting suspicious about the management fees." Marcus took the flash drive like it was made of gold. "Why didn't you mention this before?" "Because it also contains evidence that I knowingly falsified. Violation reports. If this goes to court, it'll probably send me to prison too." Marcus studied Tom's face, seeing a man wrestling with the choice between self-preservation and doing the right thing. "Tom, I can't promise you won't face consequences, but I can promise that cooperating fully is your best chance at redemption, for yourself and your family." Tom nodded slowly. "Then let's nail her to the wall." At 11:15 a.m., Marcus sat in Janet Morrison's office with Tom Fletcher, Linda Cartwright, and a forensic accountant named Dr. Elizabeth Warren, who specialized in financial fraud cases. The flash drive Tom had provided was connected to Dr. Warren's laptop, and the contents were devastating. "This is incredibly sophisticated," Dr. Warren said, scrolling through spreadsheets and email chains. "She created an entire network of shell companies, false invoicing systems, and money laundering operations. This isn't simple embezzlement. This is organized criminal enterprise." Janet leaned forward. "What are we looking at in terms of total damages?" "Based on these files, I'd estimate between $400,000 and $600,000 in direct theft. But if you include the property manipulation scheme, forcing resi..." At 3:47 p.m., Margaret Henley stood in her bedroom shoving designer clothes into a Louis Vuitton suitcase, her hands shaking as she tried to fold silk blouses that kept slipping through her fingers. The Cayman Islands account Richard had set up years ago contained enough money to keep them comfortable while the legal heat died down. By tomorrow morning, they'd be on a beach in a country with very flexible extradition laws. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Plane leaves at 8 p.m. David's handling the house sale remotely. We're golden." Margaret smiled for the first time in 24 hours. Marcus Williams might own the HOA on paper, but paper meant nothing when you were 3,000 miles away sipping Mai Tais. Let him play neighborhood president with an empty treasury and a pile of legal bills. The doorbell rang. Margaret froze, a cashmere sweater clutched against her chest. Through the bedroom window, she could see a Willowbrook Estates maintenance truck parked in her driveway, along with what looked like a surveyor's van and several official-looking cars she didn't recognize. She crept to the front window and peered through the blinds. Marcus Williams stood on her porch with Linda Cartwright, a man in an orange safety vest, and two people with clipboards who looked like city inspectors. Behind them, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, watching the proceedings, with obvious interest. The doorbell rang again. "Mrs. Henley?" Marcus's voice carried clearly through the door. "This is an official HOA inspection. We need to discuss some urgent compliance issues with your property." Margaret's blood pressure spiked. She had a plane to catch in 4 hours. She didn't have time for Marcus's petty revenge games. She opened the door just wide enough to glare at him. "I'm busy. Whatever this is can wait until..." "Actually, it can't." Marcus held up a clipboard thick with official-looking documents. "We've received multiple complaints about safety violations on your property. As HOA president, I'm required to investigate immediately." "Safety violations? That's ridiculous. This house is perfect." The man in the orange vest stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm Chuck Rodriguez with City Code Enforcement. We've received reports of electrical hazards, structural instability, and potential gas leaks. I need to inspect the premises before we can clear you for occupancy." Margaret's mouth fell open. "Gas leaks? There are no gas leaks." "That's what we're here to determine," Chuck said politely. "City ordinance requires immediate evacuation of any structure with reported gas hazards until inspection is complete." "How long will that take?" "Could be several hours, maybe overnight if we need to bring in specialists." Margaret felt the walls closing in. "This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer." "That's your right," Marcus said calmly. "But until the inspection is complete, this property is under city safety hold. Nobody goes in or out." One of the clipboard people stepped forward. "Mrs. Henley, I'm Susan Martinez with the County Assessor's Office. We also need to discuss the property tax discrepancies we've discovered. It appears your house has been significantly underassessed for the past 6 years." "Underassessed?" "Your property taxes have been calculated based on a 2,400 square foot residence. But our new measurements show 3,847 square feet. The back taxes and penalties total approximately $47,000. The exact amount Margaret had stolen from the HOA accounts that morning. The irony was so perfect, it had to be deliberate. "This is insane," Margaret said, but her voice cracked. "You can't just show up and..." "Actually, we can." The second clipboard person introduced herself as Detective Sarah Kim with the Financial Crimes Unit. Mrs. Henley, I have a warrant to search these premises in connection with an ongoing embezzlement investigation. I also have a court order freezing all assets pending resolution of the case. Margaret's legs went weak. Freezing assets? Every bank account, every investment, every piece of property registered to you, your husband, or any associated business entities. The court order was signed 2 hours ago. Margaret's phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Airport security. Won't let me through. Says my passport is flagged. What the hell is going on? The trap was complete. Margaret could see it now. Marcus had used her own tactics against her, but with actual legal authority behind every action. Code enforcement, tax assessment, criminal investigation, all legitimate agencies executing real warrants based on actual evidence. I want to speak to my lawyer, she said weakly. Of course, Detective Kim said, but I should inform you that your attorney, William Morrison, has also been detained for questioning regarding his role in facilitating money laundering operations. Margaret's world tilted. Bill Morrison had been their family lawyer for 15 years. If he was talking to police... Marcus stepped closer, his voice low enough that only Margaret could hear. This is what it feels like, Margaret. This is what you did to Bill Patterson, to the Chen family, to every person you terrorized with manufactured emergencies and bureaucratic harassment. The only difference is that everything happening to you today is completely legitimate. What do you want? The words came out as barely a whisper. I want you to understand that your choices have consequences. You stole from your neighbors. You destroyed families, and you thought you were untouchable because you controlled the system. Marcus's voice was deadly calm. But you never actually controlled the system. You just thought you did. Detective. Kim was setting up what looked like evidence collection equipment in the living room. Chuck Rodriguez had disappeared into the basement with a gas detector. The county assessor was measuring the exterior walls with a laser range finder. Margaret's phone rang. The caller ID showed her brother-in-law, David. Margaret, the police are at my house. They're saying something about real estate fraud. What did you tell them? I didn't tell them anything. Well, somebody did. They have records, Margaret. Bank transfers, property deeds, email correspondence. They know about Pine Valley properties, about the house flips, about everything. The line went dead. Through the window, Margaret could see more neighbors gathering. Word was spreading through Willowbrook that the woman who had terrorized them for years was finally getting a taste of her own medicine. Linda Cartwright approached the door, carrying a manila envelope that looked ominously familiar. Margaret, I need to serve you with an official notice, Linda said, her voice carrying none of its usual deference. As the new HOA president, I'm informing you of several property violations that require immediate attention. Margaret took the envelope, with numb fingers. Inside were photographs of her house from every angle, with red circles highlighting dozens of supposed violations. Mailbox height incorrect, decorative lighting non-compliant, garden sprinkler system creating illegal runoff, window trim color not approved by architectural committee, the exact same harassment she'd inflicted on others, but these violations were real. Margaret had been so focused on persecuting her neighbors that she'd never bothered to ensure her own property met the standards she enforced on everyone else. The total fines come to $12,400, Linda continued. Payment is due within 72 hours, or we'll be forced to place a lien on the property. Margaret looked up to see Marcus watching her with satisfaction. You measured my mailbox, she said. Among other things. Turns out your property has more legitimate violations than any house in the neighborhood. Funny how that works when someone actually follows the rules instead of making them up. Detective Kim emerged from the living room carrying several boxes of documents. Mrs. Henley, I need you to come with me for questioning. You're not under arrest at this time, but I strongly advise you to cooperate fully. What about my house? The city safety hold remains in effect until the inspection is complete. You won't be able to return until all violations are corrected and the gas leak investigation is resolved." Margaret looked around at the faces surrounding her. Neighbors she'd bullied, officials she couldn't intimidate, systems she couldn't manipulate. For the first time in years, she was completely powerless. "How long?" she asked. Chuck Rodriguez consulted his clipboard. "Well, the gas leak investigation could take 24 to 48 hours. The electrical inspection needs to be scheduled separately, probably early next week. And the structural assessment?" He shrugged. "Could be a while." Marcus stepped closer as Detective Kim led Margaret toward an unmarked police car. "Margaret, do you remember what you told me yesterday about individual sacrifice for community benefit?" Margaret couldn't find her voice. "Well, congratulations. You're finally making a meaningful contribution to this community. Your arrest is going to bring a lot of healing to people you've hurt." As the police car pulled away, Marcus stood in Margaret's driveway watching the crowd of neighbors slowly disperse. Many of them stopped to thank him, to share their own stories of HOA harassment, to express amazement that justice had finally come to Willowbrook Estates. Jerry Kowalski approached, moving slowly but with more energy than Marcus had seen from him in months. "Marcus, I need to tell you something," Jerry said. "Eleanor Henley used to slip me $20 bills to keep copies of certified mail receipts. She said she was keeping records, but I never understood what for. She was building evidence, proving that Margaret's claims about undelivered notices were lies." 3 months later, Marcus Williams stood in his driveway washing his father's Mustang, while the sounds of children playing drifted across Willowbrook Estates for the first time in years. The cherry-red paint gleamed in the April sunshine, and, for the first time since his father's death, Marcus could look at the car without feeling the weight of grief. "Looking good, Dad," he whispered, running the chamois cloth over the chrome bumper. "Talking to yourself again." Sarah Chen emerged from the house next door, carrying a tray of lemonade and wearing the easy smile of someone who'd finally come home. "Talking to the car, completely different kind of crazy." Sarah laughed, setting the tray on Marcus's porch table. "Mom's making Korean barbecue for the block party tomorrow. She wants to know if you have any food allergies we should know about." "Just allergic to HOA tyranny," Marcus said. "But I think we've got that under control now." The Willowbrook Estates community celebration was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, the first neighborhood gathering in over a decade that wasn't a mandatory HOA meeting or a violation hearing. Families who'd been driven away were returning. New residents were moving in. Property values were actually rising as word spread about the neighborhood's transformation. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Linda Cartwright. "Final restitution payment cleared the bank this morning. Every stolen dollar has been returned with interest. Margaret's assets covered everything." The Henley family's financial empire had unraveled completely. Margaret was serving 18 months in minimum security prison for embezzlement and conspiracy. Richard had received 2 years for money laundering. David faced 5 years for real estate fraud. Their combined assets had been liquidated to pay restitution to every family they'd wronged, plus legal fees and punitive damages. The Patterson family had used their compensation to buy a bigger house 2 streets over. The Kowalski family had paid off Jerry's medical bills and set up a college fund for his grandson. The Chen family had returned to a neighborhood that actually welcomed diversity instead of merely tolerating it. Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Tom Fletcher's number. "Marcus, I wanted to let you know the community service hours are finally finished." Tom had received probation and 800 hours of community service in exchange for his cooperation and testimony. He'd spent the past 3 months helping coordinate the neighborhood restoration project, using his accounting skills to manage budgets and track progress instead of fabricating violations. "How does it feel?" Marcus asked. "Like I've finally done something useful with my life. Marcus, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that helping rebuild what I helped destroy It's been the most meaningful work I've ever done. Marcus had struggled with forgiveness over the past few months. Tom Fletcher had been weak and complicit, but he'd also been genuinely remorseful and worked tirelessly to make amends. Sometimes redemption wasn't about forgetting the past, it was about choosing to build a better future. Tom, you're welcome at tomorrow's block party. Bring your family. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Marcus wondered if the call had dropped. Thank you, Tom finally said, his voice thick with emotion. That means everything. After hanging up, Marcus walked through the neighborhood that had become his responsibility and his pride. Eleanor Henley's old house had been purchased by a young family with twin toddlers who were already legendary for their enthusiastic sidewalk chalk artwork. The rose garden was blooming again under the care of someone who saw it as a gift rather than a burden. Jerry Kowalski was back to delivering mail. His health recovered enough for light duty. He waved from across the street, where he was helping the new residents on Maple Street plant a vegetable garden in their front yard. Something that would have triggered massive fines under Margaret's regime, but was now actively encouraged by the new community standards. Marcus's phone buzzed with another text, this one from Janet Morrison. County prosecutor wants to offer you a job. Apparently they need someone who understands HOA law and has a talent for building airtight cases. The offer was tempting, but Marcus had other plans. The county road department had promoted him to supervisor after word spread about his investigative skills. More importantly, he'd been elected as permanent HOA president by unanimous vote of all 370 shareholders, most of whom had never bothered to vote before because they'd assumed their voices didn't matter. As he walked past the community pool, Marcus could see the transformation clearly. The water was crystal clear, maintained by a local company that charged fair rates and provided excellent service. The surrounding deck had been repaired and expanded using the recovered embezzlement funds. Children were laughing, parents were socializing, and for the first time in years, the pool area felt like the community gathering place it was meant to be. Marcus! Linda Cartwright approached from the direction of the mail center, carrying a manila envelope that no longer made residents' stomachs clench with dread. The insurance settlement came through for the Hendersons' roof damage. Turns out Margaret had been denying legitimate claims for years. Under Margaret's administration, HOA insurance claims had been routinely denied or delayed to keep premiums low and make the books look better. The new board had hired an independent insurance advocate who was working through years of backlogged claims, providing relief to families who'd been forced to pay for covered damages out of their own pockets. Any word on the final forensic audit? Marcus asked. Dr. Warren says she's identified approximately $1.2 million in total damages across all the schemes. Every penny has been recovered and returned to either the HOA treasury or directly to affected families. Marcus shook his head. It's hard to believe one person caused that much damage. It wasn't one person. It was a system that allowed one person to operate without accountability. Your father always said that power without oversight inevitably becomes corruption. Marcus smiled. You knew my dad? He helped me plant my first garden when I moved here in 2003. He said the secret to a good neighborhood was making sure everyone felt like they belonged. I think he'd be proud of what you've built here. As evening approached, Marcus made his way back to his own house, where he found a familiar figure sitting on his porch steps. Eleanor Henley's ghost, of course, wasn't actually there, but the envelope tucked under his doormat might as well have been left by her spirit. Inside was a deed transfer document and a letter from the estate attorney. Marcus, this is the final piece of Eleanor's estate plan. She left instructions that if her strategy succeeded in exposing the corruption and restoring legitimate leadership to the HOA, you were to receive her house and property as a reward for your stewardship. Eleanor believed that good leaders shouldn't profit from their service, but they should be supported in continuing that service. The house comes with a trust fund sufficient to cover all maintenance and taxes, ensuring you'll never be forced to leave Willowbrook due to financial pressure. Eleanor's final letter to you was sealed and is to be opened only after the successful restoration of community governance. That seal has now been broken. Janet Morrison. Inside the second envelope, Eleanor's spidery handwriting conveyed her final message. Dear Marcus, if you're reading this, then justice has been served, and our neighborhood has been healed. I knew you were the right person for this task the moment I saw you refuse to be intimidated by Margaret's bullying. The house I'm leaving you isn't just a reward, it's a responsibility. Willowbrook needs a leader who understands that true authority comes from serving others, not ruling them. You've proven you understand that distinction. I've also established a legal foundation to ensure this kind of corruption can never take root again. The Willowbrook Community Trust will provide ongoing oversight of HOA finances, legal support for residents facing harassment, and resources for community improvement projects. You're not just the HOA president, Marcus. You're the protector of everything we've built together. Don't let anyone forget that power belongs to the people it serves, not the people who wield it. Your neighbor and friend, Eleanor Henley P.S. Check the rose garden behind my house. I planted something special there for you. At sunset, Marcus walked through Eleanor's back gate and found the rose garden in full bloom. But nestled among the hybrid teas and climbing roses was something that made his heart skip. A single cherry tree, maybe 8 feet tall, its branches heavy with blossoms that matched the color of his father's Mustang exactly. A small plaque at the base of the tree read, "In memory of Frank Williams, who taught his son that justice delayed is not justice denied." Marcus sank to his knees in the soft earth, overwhelmed by the generosity of a woman he'd never really known, but who had somehow understood exactly what he needed. Eleanor had given him more than a house or a car or even justice. She'd given him a community where his father's values could flourish. As the first stars appeared over Willowbrook Estates, Marcus pulled out his phone and sent a group text to the Block Party Planning Committee. Tomorrow, we're not just celebrating our community, we're celebrating the people who made it possible, especially the ones who can't be here to see what they built. The responses came quickly. Linda. Eleanor. Would be so proud. Sarah. Dad says we're